Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's special selection comes at us from Progpair. I think it's time for some Mats and Morgan on the channel. I'm submitting one of my favorite tracks by them, captured live in a TV studio for a Swedish educational show on public service TV in 2002. It's a wild ride. A wild ride. Enjoy. I'm pretty sure I will. Every time that we've checked out Mats and Morgan in the past, I've enjoyed what they're bringing to the table. Bit eclectic, but always bringing something progressive to my ears. So, with that said, let's dive into this. The song is Hollmervalsen, I believe is how that's pronounced. Let's see what's going on with it. I think the opening was in 5, but this section is 7/8. Yeah, definitely a 7 here. You can count it 7/8 or 7/4. I think both work fine. Yeah, see, we're back to the 5 from the intro. And the intro is literally like 4 bars, and then we kicked into the 7. Everybody's in on this very rhythmic idea. Ooh, oh, there's some subtle shifts. Oh, bringing in space, that's nice. It is ridiculous how bored everybody looks. Ooh. It sounded like the jaw harp. Cool little polyrhythmic thing the drummer's doing. Yeah, keeping the core rhythm that everybody else in it is in on, but also spicing it up a little bit with its own rhythmic ideas. And now back to our regularly scheduled contents. Yeah, the drummer definitely has the bass going on, where all the mental work is going towards keeping the groove going, and so the bass is just on its own. Everybody else in the band just looks so bored though. Ooh. Funky bass work. So where I'm at right now is that this is rhythmically technical, memorizing all the structure of when to do what rhythmic ideas puts a lot of stress on the performative side. But I'm waiting for the thing to happen, for it to become a song and not an idea. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is it. Interesting too, the production on the drums get pulled back and compressed down. They lack the full body that we have here. Okay. There's some really interesting harmonic elements going on in here. It's not really dissonant, but it's not consonant either. There's a lot of instability, but I think it's the rapidity of notes. The fact that we don't stay in that dissonance for very long, that doesn't make it immediately unpalatable. There's about a 1 second desync between the video and the audio, and it's kind of irritating me. I have a small pet peeve for that. For the blues guitar solo, or blues rock solo? Well, for a second anyways. Back to the 7. Again, sticking with that atonality, it's tough to really figure out what scale we're in, what key we're in. Actually, there, we had a very clear notion of some of the harmonic elements. Listening to the specific chords that one keyboard was playing. Very dissonant, very much lacking stability. I think the thing is, like, this is very experimental. This is very progressive. There's a lot of areas of progressiveness in this, and I don't know where to start with it. Excuse me, I'm working off of like 3 hours of sleep last night. Yeah, let's start with harmony. I think that's the simplest one to go on. What key are we in, right? The more I listen to this, the more that I can't place it anywhere. It lacks the clear sound that chromatic has, but it also feels like we are utilizing most of the keys. I think part of this, though, is just that our harmonic stacks, our chords, they're all over the place. It honestly feels like at times we are incorporating 6, 7, 8 notes out of our 12 notes uh, Western notation. That's what I wanted. In some of these chords when we incorporate everybody, because the thing is, right, everybody's playing these rhythms. They're complex rhythms, but everybody's in on them, and a lot of the keyboardists are playing chords. The guitarist is playing chords. um I don't think they're all playing the same chords, the same grouping of notes. But I don't think there's a lot of overlap either. Where like one pianist might be playing these three notes and another one's playing these three, where there's like an overlap here. And so this is really just 4 pitches here. I feel like everything's a bit more distanced, where there's just a lot of pitches being played together, and not all of it in any way that is designed to be consonant, where the harmony is positive. And I think a lot of this, like I said, even there at the end, we heard that one chord from that one type of keyboard very clearly. It's one of the few times, because the speed of everything, like the quickness that we play a note, get off of that note and play the next one, makes it so that it's difficult to hear the full amount of notes, because by the time we've begun to process the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 notes that we've heard, the next set of 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 notes is being thrust at us, and it's so fast that it sort of blurs together. But there at the end, I heard clear as day the chord that at least one of the keyboards were playing, and it was just noise. It was a bunch of dissonant sound. And I think when we have multiple instruments all playing their own version of this noisy dissonance, that's what's creating this, and that's what gives us these large stacks. The more notes that you add to a chord, the more complex and unstable it gets. There's a reason why power chords, being super stable, only have 2 pitches to them. 3 pitches, 2 notes, because we have an octave and a root, which are the same note, just different pitches. But even when you start looking at a lot of classical music, especially modern classical, your chords are 3, 4, 5 notes, maybe tops. Once you get past that, you start reaching a point where the extra information is just beginning to clash more. And I really think that we have a large amount of notes here. Maybe even all 12 at some times. I'm not entirely sure. As I mentioned, it's very difficult for me to pull out all of the information being presented here at the speed that it's thrown at me, but there's just a lot of dissonance in a way that's created with so much sonic information that to me it sounds chromatic-ish. Chromatic just means we're using all 12 of the notes. This what I'm trying to say here is that I don't get an emotional resonance on any of this, because everything just sounds like everything. And when everything's everything, everything is nothing. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but if you play every note and you don't omit anything, you also play every emotion and you don't omit anything. And then it's not really saying any one specific emotion, if that makes sense. I do find it interesting, though, because chromatic tends to feel a specific way to me. I can listen to it, oh, that's the chromatic scale. That doesn't happen here. This just comes across as noise. But I do think we're using a vast amount of the 12 notes that we have available in Western notation. So we have a bit of progressiveness harmonically there. What notes are being chosen, how they're stacked up, what intervals we have between notes in our chords. It's progressive rhythmically too. I don't think I need to explain this one too much. The song starts off in a 5 we get 4 bars of that, and then we shift to a 7. The rest of the song primarily dances between the 7 and 4, although occasionally we do return back to that 5. But we exist in 4 for a vast majority of this track, and it reminds me of something else that is hyper complex rhythmically, but not complex tempo or time signature. That's Meshuggah. And I think at this point, longtime fans of the channel know exactly where this video is going. This is very djenty, where there's a hyper focus on rhythmic groove, rhythmic experimentation, but all played primarily within the standard 4/4 time signature. Not a lot of complexity there. Everybody in the band is in on this groove, which happens in djent and even Meshuggah quite often. The drummer is the one who exists outside of it, crafting a polyrhythmic idea where usually one instrument, maybe a cymbal or a snare, maybe even the bass kick, has the same accent points as the rest of the band, following in line with that rhythm, but another part of the drum kit or another limb is focused on a different set of accents, creating the polyrhythmic flow, maybe even polymetric flow at times. I never quite caught a section where I was like, that's definitely polymetric, but the idea still stands that the drummer is playing multiple rhythms or multiple grooves in order to add a second layer of complexity to the rhythmic element here. Playing all of this in 4/4 is both a neat little trick. I think it's interesting to take something so standard and warp it so far that most people would be surprised to hear that this is the most standard time signature that this song takes place in. That's one of the fun things about Meshuggah, as well as from what I've come to understand, they primarily play in 4/4, and yet all of their songs sound ridiculously complex. It's just a good notion, a good reminder that standards don't necessarily mean simple. They just mean that that's what most people use, and you can certainly push them to some limits. But the other thing that I think I like about them choosing 4/4 is simply to provide the standard framework for everything. When you play complex rhythms on top of complex time signatures, maybe even the time signature itself isn't static either. You're constantly shifting time signatures. You're just creating a lot of complexity that honestly is more for the musician's sake than anybody else. That's not always a bad thing. Music for music's sake is awesome. I love when people just push the boundaries of an art form to see what they can do with it. I am all for that, even if casually I don't always enjoy it. But at least in this case, I think choosing the 4/4 allows them to create a foundation of simplicity, a strong foundation where everybody can sort of come into this simple idea and build the complexity, the difficulty on top of that. And so the end result to the listener is that this is some wild rhythmic stuff. And if they had crazy time signatures in there as well, the end result would be this is some crazy rhythmic stuff. So they don't really get anything extra out of crafting more difficult to play time signatures or different time signature phrasings for the end listener. It's more for them. And for other musicians who are trying to play it or play music like it or evolve their own skills by learning what they write. There's the entire what I would call the academic approach to it. But as far as a general music listener approach, you don't gain anything extra by having layers of complexity on top of each other. You only need a couple of layers of complexity and it's already going to sound very deep and very complex to the average listener. And so, it's one of those ideas of efficient writing. Don't make it too hard on yourself unless you're, aiming to be the best of the best. You want that peak level of performance or whatever. But if you're just aiming for complexity, pick a couple of axes and make those complex and make everything else simple, and it's still going to sound phenomenal to the average listener. And that's what's going on here. So I think it works twofold. And of course, speaking about these, axes of complexity, aside from the drums, everybody's doing the same rhythm here. It really is creating that layer of simplicity. We don't have to worry about two guitarists doing two different things or two keyboardists doing two different things. Everybody's on the same accent points. And so it again creates that level of simplicity that makes it a bit easier to play, but doesn't necessarily remove any of the complexity from the end result. The last bit of experimentation is one that I don't know that a lot of people picked up on. I'm trying to place this in context. This was from 2002, I believe Progpair had mentioned, which means the song came out prior to that. It might have also been 2002, but it could have also been in the 90s. I know Meshuggah had already played some stuff. Meshuggah was from the late 90s, right? This style of hyper-rhythmic playing was already present, at least in the metal field. And so I don't want to say that this was breaking new grounds. But one area that I do think it experiments in a way that maybe people weren't necessarily listening to is sonically. Do you listen to some of these sounds in here? Like, if you get rid of the hyper complex drumming and keyboard work and bass and guitar, and you start listening to the sounds of the instruments, there's some wild ones in here. I heard something akin to a jaw harp. There's some wild vibrato based instruments in here. There's some crazy synth pads that I can't quite place arrow wise. And I really couldn't even begin to describe. It would be more like, hey, let's listen to the song again. I'm going to point out all the weird little synth pads that they have in here. It's not even just the instruments being played, though. Listen to the ornamental ideas, the little phrases that pop up at the end of every 8 bars or something. Just one little lick, 3 or 4 bars here, in like the wildest sound. Somebody is sitting around here with a keyboard with just like the wackiest tones they can find, or probably create is probably more accurate, and utilizing those to play the ornamental licks that help divide up the repeated ideas in here. The more that I listen to these, the wackier they got. There seemed to be no limit for what would be acceptable for a sound to be played. Just like, hey, I came up with a new combination of knobs and dials and stuff on the keyboard. It sounds like this, and they're like, yeah, create a little lick. We're gonna throw that in the song somewhere. It's bonkers. It really is. And I found that to be one of my favorite games to play while listening to this is what sound are we going to hear next? Because rhythmically, I did get kind of bored in this. Same thing that happens with Meshuggah, honestly. It's fascinating to hear this type of rhythmic stuff. But like I say with Gent, rhythmic ideas don't make a song. There are certainly people who enjoy that. It's not for me. I need something more. It's a fantastic foundation, but this song and songs like it utilize it as the entirety of the song, and to me it ends up feeling empty. It's missing a layer. And for me, that layer ends up being a melody of some sort. I need a storytelling component to this. This is just groove and atmosphere. And like I said, that's fine. There's people who love that, right? There's a huge fandom of Meshuggah, and Meshuggah does this same type of thing to a metallic degree. It's not for me. It's the same issue I kind of have with Animals as Leaders, where it's just so technical, but missing that. I hate to use this word, because I think it puts a negative connotation on stuff like this, but it's missing the soul. It's missing, for me, that emotional element to connect with. This is technically impressive. From a musician and academic perspective, I absolutely love it. From a casual perspective, though, there's nothing in here that really hooks me. It's a neat idea. The idea just never got turned into art. For me, I want that to be clear. This is my subjective opinion. If you like this type of music, that's fine. I'm not going to be up here and gatekeep and call this not music or something dumb like that. It's just not it's not for me. And so, like I said, I kind of turned that into a game. What's the next sound that's coming up? Because the rhythmic stuff just kept repeating. It's complex, but it's very loop based in this. I suppose the final bit of experimentation that happens in here is structure, phrasing. If we take just those rhythmically complex parts, we end up with a kind of, depending on your tastes, a boring, or if nothing else, repetitive would probably be a more objective description of it, song. About 4.5 or 5 minutes worth, just 2 or 3 rhythmic ideas that take us from the beginning to the end. But that's not what the song is, at least not in isolation. There are the commercial breaks, the interjections, whatever you want to call them, when we move to something completely different for 4, 8 bars, not very long, usually something that changes genre and style heavily, might focus on a simpler groove, might actually bring in some melody or atmospheric chord writing to juxtapose the noisy, chaotic, harmonically ambiguous sound that the song resides in primarily. These are interesting. We had something that to me felt a little bit like they were going for like a 70s funk, like prog funk. Is that a thing? We had some blues rock in there with a guitar solo for just a couple of seconds. Honestly, by the time I picked up that it was blues rock, we were already leaving and moving on to something else. Uh, it's just a series, like 3, 4 maybe palette cleansers in here to break up the rhythmic and harmonic chaos. Uh, I don't know about this. From a subjective perspective, I didn't like it. It's very disorganized. It disrupts the general flow of things. They usually come out of nowhere, have nothing to do with the rest of the song. It's these little asides. The same thing I kind of brought up in Between the Buried and Me last week about these little moments of total gear shift. But at the same time, from an objective point of view, they are a fantastic palate cleanser. They introduce some stuff that is the exact opposite of what the majority of the song is, giving us melody and harmony and atmosphere, chord progression, giving us a moment to appreciate something a bit more traditionally written before thrusting us back into the chaos of it all. And I think that the schism between the two, the contrast between the two styles, allows both of them to stand out more. It gives me a stronger appreciation for those moments where we have melody, something I feel like the majority of the song is missing. And I really cling on to those moments. I do wish that they were paced out a little bit better. They tend to be these little interjections, like I called them little commercials. They'll come in and it's just a few seconds, and then we're back to the regularly scheduled program, as I mentioned during the reaction. So from that perspective, it really feels like they're minor diversions rather than a hard point of contrast to create, um, some dynamics to the song. But I do think they act as nice palate cleansers and a moment to breathe, even if it is a short moment. And it does pull us out of the rhythmic chaos in order to kind of reset the barometer. So when we get back to that sort of chaos, it still feels like it's chaotic. It still feels like it's rhythmically impressive, despite the fact that it makes up like 70% of the song. It's one of those ideas of just, if you're always at 11, 11 now feels like 5. It's your medium point. It's the status quo of the song. So it's these little moments where you can reset that. The chaos, the intensity, that's like maxed out all the time, and we drop it down a little bit and we return back to it. So it doesn't just become the status quo. It is always this height, this peak of the song. There's no lyrics to this track, so that wraps up my thoughts. Matts and Morgan's Hollmervalsen, I think is how that's pronounced. Let me know your thoughts, opinions, perspectives about this track. Was there anything that I mentioned you want to add on to, or maybe just correct me on? Put all your thoughts and stuff down in the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you to this menu right here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today, but I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. We're going to continue on with minimalistic composition and check out another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical. I think for a second I was going to say not simple. Oh man, I don't know what this song did to my brain. Be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.